Hello and welcome to Her Love Like Poison. This is a toxic lesbian horror romance story about falling in love with a mysterious mushroom lady. Cause, yeah, gotta love me some mushrooms. So, anyway, that's about all I know. I'm going into this pretty much blind as I do with every other game. So, with that, we'll start a new game. Ethel Briggs was trying to play the second movement on Mozart's violin, Sonata number 21, but she wasn't having much luck. Gee, first achievement I get is try and fail to play the violin. Lovely. Great start to the game already. It has been months since she last picked up a violin, and the lack of practice has made her rusty. She had played this particular piece numerous times, not for any competitions. She had always been too shy to enter any, despite Miss Manderley's gentle coaxing, but for her own satisfaction. Mozart's violin Sonata 21 was one of her favourites. Ethel wasn't a huge Mozart, whatever that word is, doesn't like how upbeat most of his pieces were, how frothy, flippant, and inoffensive. On the whole, she thought that Mozart was far too cheerful. Ethel much preferred the quiet, understanding melancholy of Beethoven or Chopin's clean, precise compositions. But there was something special about Violin Sonata 21. This was one of Mozart's few sonatas in E minor, composed in Paris shortly after his mother's death. First part of the Allegro, and it contained some of the familiar energy which was so distinctly Mozart, but for the second was far more moving. Second movement of Mozart's Violin Sonata 21 had a special place in Ethel's heart, maybe because this was one of the first violin pieces she had heard. It was this piece which had inspired her to take up the violin in the first place. Ethel wanted to be able to play this melancholy piece with her own two hands, to bring this ethereal, haunting music into the world of her own volition. Many years Ethel had attended her violin lessons dutifully, and for a while she had accomplished her goal. She had performed this piece often enough that muscle memory could make up for the lack of practice. But though Ethel knew she had the notes mostly correct wasn't good enough. Ethel's right hand slipped and the bow scraping unpleasantly against the strings and she winced. She had been at it for some 5 minutes, trying to recreate her past successes, but this was the final straw. What was the point of pursuing this any further? It wasn't as though she was performing this for an audience. I mean, it's an audience for one, I guess. She was at home on her own, and this was a blessing. If her parents and her two younger brothers had been there, Ethel wouldn't have been able to play her once beloved violin at all. They all would have told her to knock it off, apart from Rowan, of course, or maybe. Rowan had always been kind. Maybe he, like the other members of Ethel's family, was simply too self-conscious to say what he actually thought. Maybe Rowan looked down on Ethel too, for her strange, lonely, old-fashioned hobbies. Ethel's family didn't care for classical music. Father Jude liked Iron Maiden, Dio, and Judas Priest, while her mother, Lauren, listened to anything that was trending on TikTok. Manny, meanwhile, listened to loud, shouty music, and Ethel didn't know what Rowan liked because he never told anybody. Rowan was very secretive about his interest, almost furtive. Sure that's not gonna be some subtle foreshadowing for later, maybe? I hope not. If her family had listened to classical music, however, Ethel knew they would have preferred Mozart to Beethoven and Chopin. Mozart seemed like exactly the sort of person Lauren would have enjoyed, chatting with over a pint, Come to think of it, the Mozart in Amadeus was at all like the real man. Ethel sighed. She was disappointed in herself. She hadn't been playing the violin for very long, but her jaw was aching and her fingers were already beginning to hurt. Gloomily, she set her violin down. Gloomily, she looked at it, lying on her bed. Eyes softened in such a way that she looked rather like an abandoned puppy. Also just realized how much hair she has. My god, that must be a nightmare to upkeep. Then, feeling rather sad and sorry for herself, she sniffed. She had loved the violin once, but her love had long since dwindled. Everything which she had brought Ethel joy had become grey and faded since Clementine had left her. What with her love for music? Or what did her love for music matter now? Had it ever mattered? Ethel was already 21. Simultaneously, she was only 21. She was in her final year of university. The adult world loomed before her. Rather than welcoming it, however, Ethel found herself shrinking away from her future responsibilities. That was probably why she had dug out her old violin, to play through her favourite piece from her childhood. She had been trying to cling to the past. Simply didn't want to grow up. Ethel sat down on her bed, defeated, though she supposed it wasn't her bed anymore. It hadn't been for almost 3 years. When Ethel was at university in Durham, Manny slept in what had once been her room. When Ethel came back for the holidays, Manny and Rowan were forced to share a room, something they both resented. Now it's a tight squeeze, Jude always said, but try to bear with it. Ethel can't be expected to share with either of you. She's the oldest, and she's a young lady. She needs her space. Don't be so surly. Ron was good-natured enough that he didn't complain about the sleeping arrangement too much. Not to Ethel's face, at least, but Manny was less so. Manny was only 13. Yeah, that's definitely an age, sir. Starting out his angsty years. And he hadn't learned how to be tactful yet. Ethel's youngest brother had been in an awful mood all Christmas. A mood which Ethel knew was largely because of her unwanted presence. It had been a relief when her family had left the day prior for Luton Airport for the holidays they had been looking forward to so much. Now that Manny was no longer skulking around, showed her nasty glares whenever their paths crossed, Ethel felt like she could finally breathe. Some small part of Ethel wished that she had accompanied her family. Never been to Australia before, and she was curious about it. Hey, Australia is a pretty cool and chill place. It depends on also what parts you go to, because, we definitely have, our own fair share of, not so savory people, especially when it comes to racism and, other shit. But yeah, anyway. Yeah. Besides that, there's also the animals, but yeah. People make these dangerous animals. Yeah, they make them out to be a lot more dangerous and, expect to see them, every corner type of thing, which isn't the case. For example, snakes, unless you're, out in, the middle of the bush or out in, country area, you very rarely ever see them, unless you go to a zoo. I've lived out in the country my entire life, and I've only seen one snake. Same with spiders, we have our common, house spiders that aren't poisonous, but, yeah, again, unless you go looking for them, you won't really find them. But anyway, but another part of her thought she had made the right move. Didn't want to keep subjecting Manny to her company. She also enjoyed having the house to herself. That meant she could play the violin without having to worry about the sound carrying, and it did carry in her parents' home since the walls were so thin. Ethel had been looking forward to being on her own, but now that she was on her own, she couldn't even enjoy her newfound freedom. What was wrong with her? Ethel bit the inside of her cheek, weighing up her options. If she couldn't play a violin, she should at least give her thesis a go. Due date to hand this damn thing was approaching. She only had 2 months left to work on it. Now, that's plenty of time. But she had not written a single line of it yet. Well, that's an issue though, because if you don't get started on it soon, it's gonna be too late and you're gonna have to pull an all-nighter and pray to whatever gods that you're gonna somehow push through it. She couldn't bring herself to. Like the violin, Ethel had lost her interest in her thesis, and in her degree. Ethel had used her thesis as an excuse to get out of going on holiday with her parents, told them she needed to focus on her work, but she'd been doing precisely little work all day, and wasting an awful lot of time. Yeah, but it looks like it's already nighttime outside. Ethel glanced at her violin, which lay discarded on her bed. Then she sighed for the umpteenth time that night. How had things come to this? What had happened to make her lose interest in everything which had once delighted her, especially her beloved violin? Unwilling girls might have been coerced into playing instruments by their parents, but this hadn't been the case with Ethel. Ethel had been introduced to the world of classical music quite by chance, after discovering an old CD full of the stuff in a jumble sale for 50 pence. She had been drawn to the old cracked CD, because of the smiley lady on the cover, and she hadn't been too interested in the music itself. When she listened to the CD, however, she experienced a revelation. Songs had spoken to her. She had been instantly drawn into the world of classical music, and all been thanks to Mozart's Violin Sonata No. 21. Ethel had known, after listening to that CD, that her life would never be the same again. Shortly after, she had pleaded with her parents to take her to the violin lessons, so she could play just as well as the smiley lady, the pixie haircut on the cover of that CD. Ethel had since lost that life-altering CD. She lost many things which were important to her over the years, but she couldn't remember the cover she could remember the cover clearly. The woman had been pretty, despite her unconventional haircut, silently feminine in a blue wrap dress and dangly earrings. She had held her violin against the nook of her neck, and in her other hand she had wielded a bow. There had been something commanding about the nameless woman in blue, despite how skinny she had been, how slender her arms and legs. To young Ethel, she seemed less like a person, more a queen from a fairy tale. Garland of flowers on her head only adding to this illusion. Ethel had necessarily wanted to play the violin for the sake of it. She just wanted to look like the nameless lady on the album cover, a lady who, Ethel now realized, probably hadn't played any of the songs arranged on the CD. The woman on that cover had probably been a model, brought into a studio to pose with a violin she couldn't play. That's what she'd been a stock image lifted from the internet. When Ethel had grown up enough to realize this, it had sullied the mystique of the seminal CD, a little like how other children felt betrayed after learning Santa wasn't real. Wait, Santa's not real? I'm kidding, I already know that he's not real. Already had that conversation when I was a kid. It had been an eye-opening moment, but maybe it had been for the best. This revelation had lessened Ethel's pain, at least when the CD had gone missing a few years ago. In any case, Ethel's violin lessons had never quite lived up to her expectations. Ethel had kept up at the violin, carried by initial childish enthusiasm, but her enthusiasm had faded when she started secondary school. She realized that she would never be as smiley or as happy as the elfin lady on that CD cover. She would never be that pretty either. No amount of playing the violin could bring Ethel closer to her idealized image of perfection, something which became all the more apparent when Shania and her gang had started to bully her. Ethel grew so disenchanted with the violin she grew up on her lessons at the start of year 11. She had needed to focus on her GCSEs anyway, and it hadn't helped that she would jam her fingers during the netball game in PE, and it hurt for a whole month to hold her bow. Judah never liked it when she played in the house anyway, especially when there was a big game on. Manny, meanwhile, had always said her scraping sounded unbearable. Like nails on a chalkboard. Can you pack it in? Manny used to say, and in the end, Ethel did just that. Packed the violin in, but not for good. She continued to play here and there. When her parents and her brothers were out of the house, there was nobody to hear her. Sometimes Ethel even took joy in her playing, but these moments had been few and far between. Once Ethel had played the violin dedicatedly, once a week at a teacher's, Miss Manderley's. Now she played once a month, if that, and she did so furtively, as if it were shameful of a secret. Ethel couldn't help but feel embarrassed as she played, as though she were performing an obscene act even more intimate than masturbation. That is one hell of an analogy. Playing the violin and masturbation do vastly different things. Maybe playing the violin was masturbation. I mean, maybe some would consider that. I mean, I guess it kind of makes the same motions, I guess. Yeah. Maybe playing the violin was masturbation, in a sense, because it only ever brought her pleasure. Okay, that's weird, but I've heard weirder things, but not everything needs to be compared to masturbation, especially when it comes to pleasure, because there's different kinds of pleasures. But, yeah. Yeah, I really hope you're not, like, doing that sort of stuff and playing with your you-know-what's with a violin bow thing, because, oh my god, that'd fucking hurt. Unless you're a masochist, then, yeah, just please do it safely. Nobody else had, in her life had cared to listen to her. Nobody except dear old Miss Manderley. She'd been encouraging, but what had this brought Ethel? Ooh, pretty night sky. It's so pretty. Ethel left her violin on the bed, approached the window, footsteps muffled like a cat's quiet padding. Once there, she stood at the sill and glanced out at the garden beyond. It was late at night. The digital clock on a bedside table said it was already 20:30, so that'd be 8:30. See, I know how to read military time. Pretty easy, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't know how to read military time. And even more surprisingly, how many people don't know how to read like a... what's the word for it? There's a specific word for it. Well, a specific kind of clock, but yeah, like the different hands and whatnot and all that. There was a bit of a breeze outside, and the darkened silhouettes of the hedgerow hedgerows were shaking. Ethel's fingers curled around the windowsill. All of a sudden, being inside felt stifling. Ethel had been so caught up in a memory, she worried that they would overwhelm her. Nearly uneasy, Ethel took an anxious step away from the window. Wasn't sure why, but she had an intense desire to escape. That's the call of the forest, which is going to lead us down the path. It's going to be a very interesting path. She had to clear the cobwebs from her mind in some way. What better way to do that than go on a walk? It might have been late at night, but it was too late to go for a wander, really. But she did live in Oxbury. Oxbury was a tiny village, almost minuscule, really, with a nigh on non-existent crime rate. Nothing bad ever happened there. Yeah, until tonight. No stabbings ever took place in Oxbury. Contrary to the wild claims Americans on the internet like to make about the UK's crime statistics on already muggings. Yeah, compared to their, gun violence, yeah. Our places sound like a fucking paradise compared to that place. Ethel would be just fine. Why wouldn't she be? Yeah. I feel like we're gonna be jinxing ourselves. Oxbury was so safe and sterile, borderline boring. Well, tonight's definitely not going to be boring for us. And she always wanted to go on fun adventures when she was a little girl. Well, we're definitely going on an adventure, alright. But she was hardly going to come and find her. She remained indoors, steeped in her reminiscence as if she were a tea bag. Ethel didn't imagine that anything exciting would happen on a walk, but it would be better than sitting inside and stewing. Ethel padded downstairs, her feet sinking against the cushioned landing, then the cushioned steps of the staircase, paused by the front door. She eyed her old coat and ultimately left it be. It was a brown duffel coat, which Ethel had owned since sixth form. It could have been in active service for 4 long winters. Passage of time had taken its toll. One of the togles of the coat was missing. It had snapped clean off, and brown furry fabric was worn and threadbare in places. Excuse me. Like a beloved teddy bear which had been cuddled one too many times. Lauren had tutted when Ethel had come home from university. Patting that natty coat and shaking her head. You're still wearing that old thing? She'd ask, voice incredulous. Thought you would have bought a new coat by now. Looked like you'd come straight out of a jumble sale. Ethel knew her mother hadn't meant this as a compliment. Ethel's mother rarely complimented her appearance, but she liked it nonetheless. Lauren had often taken Ethel to jumble sales when she was a girl, ostensibly to find some cheap bits and pieces for the newly renovated kitchen, but actually so she could have a nap with her friends. Lauren would stand by Auntie Jean and Auntie Mariela's? Okay, yeah, that. Stalls. Weren't real aunties, of course. They were just her mother's friends. Ethel would wander around by herself, transfixed by all the wares on display. Jumble sale her mother frequented every weekend and taken place in the car park of Big Sainsbury's in Wrexham, and all sorts of people were in attendance. Hadn't just been Auntie Jeannie, who sold all paperbacks, which had once belonged to her mother. Auntie that name. Okay, why? I don't know why I'm having trouble pronouncing that one. Who sold soaps and candles. There've been other more interesting vendors with piercings and tattoos. Some of these vendors sold a bit of wood whittled into fantastical creatures. Still painted dioramas of forests and fairy tale castles. Handmade jewellery sets with stones which couldn't have been precious, but which shone regardless. And bearded dream catchers which swayed in the breeze. The wares made Annie Genie's old paperbacks and that name, soaps and candles look very pedestrian indeed. Ethel had always loved jumble sales, part because there had been so much stuff to gawp at. They had been so busy, Ethel had been able to melt into the crowds completely anonymous. Ethel had quite liked being told she looked like she came straight from one of those sales. Their mother had been less than impressed. Lauren had told her that her coat made her look mousy, but that's what Ethel preferred. She had never liked standing out. Maybe that's why she had chosen to venture outdoors at such a late hour. There wouldn't be anybody on the street to spot her. The coat really was too ratty to keep her wearing, however. Ethel left it be, reasoning her jacket would be enough. Ethel did grab her father's old torch from his toolbox, however, just in case she needed it. She stuffed it inside a canvas bag which she slung over her shoulder. And off we go. Then she stepped out onto the street. Shut the front door behind her, and soon she was enveloped by the shadows. Hoped she would be able to wander the streets uninterrupted. Yeah, I think you're going to jinx yourself there. Yep. Well, that happened a lot quicker than I expected. Well, now, this is a coincidence. It's been a while. Ethel, isn't it? Our hopes were soon scuppered. Now, have I heard that word before? Oh, hi. Not the person I was expecting. There's a man on the other side of the road. A man who looked almost as washed out as Ethel. It's hard to see in the dark, even with the street lamps illuminating the grey, gloomy pavement. But Ethel recognized the man well enough. Must have been in his 50s now. But he'd be younger than Ethel had first met him. 31, 32, she wasn't sure. Okay, yeah. He looks quite young for being in his 50s. I would have pegged that. No, not that kind of pegging. We'll be doing some pegging later, just with a very different person. And a line of face which spoke of his encroaching age that was lined in such a way that traces of the young man he'd once been still could be seen. Jaw was still firm, his nose aquiline, his eyes were striking. Man had a full head of hair despite his age, and it was more sandy brown than grey, shot through with only a few lighter strands. I guess that's the good thing about being like blonde or whatnot, you don't can hardly tell when you start going grey. Wasn't a bad looking man, definitely no monster, but Ethel still shrunk away from him. She knew him, but that did little to endear her to him. This was Mr. Brown, one of Ethel's teachers back in primary school. Mr. Brown had been one of the few male teachers at Oxbury Primary. In fact, he might have been the only male teacher. He stood out from the rest not because of his gender, but because of his sheer size. Being a mountain of a man, so much so he had to stoop to enter and exit the classroom. Being head and shoulders above Miss Pierce, Miss Bringett, and Mrs. Moyles, quite literally. Ethel had always found Mr. Brown intimidating. What with his sheer vastness, not to mention his voice, which had been deep and booming. Ethel, granted, had been a good deal shorter herself back when she had been in primary school, but Mr. Brown didn't look any less intimidating over a decade later. Ethel had grown while Mr. Brown had not, but he still eclipsed her. Mr. Brown was taller than Rowan and had shot up when he had shot up, or who had shot up when he started secondary school. Taller too than her father. Had played basketball when he was younger. He was easily taller than 6 feet. Could even have been pushing 7. Mr. Brown was a vast mountain of a man, with large hands and large feet. His coat seemed too small to contain him. Ethel had been afraid of Mr. Brown as a young girl, and little had changed. She was still afraid of him. Ethel shrunk back, shaking. What was Mr. Brown doing outside so very late? Strange, but... Puppy! Oh my god! Huh. That explained it. Must have been walking his dog. Mr. Brown's dog was a curious sight. It was the polar opposite of its owner. Small and runty where Mr. Brown was tall and white. The dog and the owner, who were so mismatched that it was almost comical. The diminutive dog, was he a spaniel? Ethel wasn't sure. It was so tiny Ethel worried Mr. Brown might step on it by accident. Ethel had known that Mr. Brown had a dog. Didn't know much about Mr. Brown at all. Hadn't thought about him in years. Was the spaniel? Yes, Ethel was sure that was a spaniel. A new addition to his family? I mean, possibly it might be still a young pup. Well, whatever, it didn't really matter. Ethel? Ethel was shocked to her silence, but perturbed Mr. Brown, because he sounded concerned when he said, "You are Ethel, aren't you? Ethel Briggs? Been a while since I saw you, but I remember you. I don't forget any of my students." "Oh, yeah, I'm Ethel. I'm sorry. I thought as much. It's nice to know I'm not going completely senile. Taking you back home from university, then?" "Oh, yes." "Going to Durham?" "Yes, did my parents tell you that?" "Aye, they did. You told me." "Oh, do you see my parents very much then?" "Oh, aye. We go to the pub quiz together sometimes in Wrexham. Your father can be very competitive." Ethel didn't disbelieve that. She had always been a bit of a know-it-all. He was the sort of man who liked to watch quiz shows solely so he could yell at the contestants for getting things wrong, and would be tired if they loused up any questions on classic rock. That was Jude's personality. Ethel couldn't imagine her mother joining in a pub quiz all that enthusiastically. But she probably went along with all the drinks and peanuts. Ethel had been at the pub in Wrexham with her parents a couple of times. Long gone rather well with the proprietor, old Jerry. He always made sure of IDing Lauren whenever she ordered a pint, though it wasn't really necessary. Lauren might have been young for a mother of 3, but she took great pains to ensure her makeup was just so. But she was clearly in her early 40s too. It was impossible that anyone might mistake her for a teenager, but Lauren still liked the attention. She thrived on it. "I've been seeing quite a bit of your parents, actually, after Evie's funeral. Mum helped me with the arrangements, and with all the refreshments. Her help was invaluable." "Ah, now that sounds familiar." Ethel thought her mother might have mentioned at some point or another that her old primary school teacher's wife had died recently. She hadn't given it much thought, but she supposed her mother must have been talking about Mr. Brown. He was the only male teacher she had, and Ethel didn't think that Miss Pierce, Miss Springer, or Miss Moores had been having any clandestine lesbian affairs on the sly. Unlike us in a few minutes whenever we get deeper into the forest. Although we technically won't be having an affair unless there's like a significant other that we don't know about just yet. They were all too old-fashioned, because of course they are. Ethel wondered briefly if Mr. Brown expected her to comment on his wife's passing, but she spared the need when he continued once more, readjusting his grip on his dog's lead. I've been curious about you too. You were one of my better students, even among all the Year 5 kiddos, so I ask about you sometimes. I hope you don't mind. Ethel did mind, as it happened. Didn't like being spoken about behind her back, even though the talk was all positive. She didn't know how to articulate this, however, without sounding rude. Stuck for words, Ethel looked at her feet and said, "Oh, no, it's fine. Parents are quite proud of you, you know. They can't stop boasting about you. You thought this was highly unlikely. Might have gone into a good university, maybe she was doing well academically. Her parents had never placed much stock into highfalutin things like degrees. Neither of her parents had been to university, due to join the workforce as soon as he'd been able to. He'd apprenticed as a plumber. Lauren hadn't even finished secondary school. She had packed in school altogether when she had been 15, so she could pursue her dreams of superstardom. Fortunately for Lauren, however, these dreams hadn't come into fruition. She had done some modeling for trashy tabloids for a few years, before debuting as an actress in a few sleazy low-budget flicks Ethel had never wanted to see. Lauren wound up settling down and starting a family with Jude when she was only 21. Her age, Ethel thought was chipper, though she never seemed particularly bitter about her long life. Lauren had never taken much of an interest in her daughter's creative or academic pursuits, though she'd not been dismissive of them either. Lauren had drawn Ethel all the way to Wrexham once a week for violin lessons with Miss Manderley, lessons she had paid for without complaining. She had seemed pleased too when Ethel had been accepted into a university of choice, though her pleasure hadn't been much more effusive than a benign, "Oh, that's nice, dear. I suppose we'll have to get you a student grant sorted then out, eh?" Ethel found it hard to believe that her mother had been boasting about her academically talented daughter. Laura would have been more inclined to boast if Ethel had started to dress more fashionably, or if she'd learned how to apply eyeliner without making her eyes water, or she started her own successful TikTok channel. Lauren had a TikTok account of her own, where she filmed herself putting on makeup, taking off makeup, showing off her nails, and singing along to her favourite pop songs. Lauren was actually fairly successful on the platform. She managed to rack up over 300,000 followers in the span of 2 years. Man, that is actually kind of impressive. Sometimes did sponsorships, there we go, with makeup brands, and it was her newfound fame, which had paid for Manny's fancy gaming PC, Jude's new guitar, and the family's holiday in Australia. Ethel had been like Lauren, bouncy and cheerful. Ethel imagined her mother might have been more inclined to boast about her. But as it was, Ethel thought it was doubtful. It wasn't hard to imagine that Mr. Brown cared about Ethel's academic achievements more than her own parents did. Still, it was kind of him. Ethel supposed to bother spinning her a white lie like that. He must have been trying to cheer her up. "Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? You'll be on your Christmas holidays now, won't you?" Or don't you want to talk about university much right now? Oh, not really. I thought as much. Sorry for bringing it up. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Thought it was appreciated, but Ethel thought it was rather too late for that. She already felt uncomfortable. That wasn't necessarily Mr. Brown's fault, however. Felt uncomfortable about most things in life. That's just how she was. I leave you on your merry way, but I am curious. What are you doing going for a walk at this hour? Very dark outside, and I think it might start raining soon. Are you sure you'll be alright? Thank you, but I'll be fine. Are you sure? Ethel nodded. I have my phone with me. I even brought my dazzle torch if it gets too dark. It should be able to light the way, but I won't be gone long. Just wanted to go looking for bats. Bats? Yes, and nightjars. Dad took me out to look for them sometimes when I was little. I'm my way around the forest, so it should be fine. If you say so. Brown didn't look wholly reassured, but he didn't try to question Ethel further. Maybe he didn't have the time for it. Dog was beginning to tug on his lead, yipping fiercely as he did. Brown's dog might have been small, but he had quite the set of lungs on him, and he clearly wasn't afraid of using them. As most dogs do, especially little dogs. My God, they are quite aggressive little ones, aren't they? They always think they're a lot bigger than they are and try to fight anything and everything. Unlike bigger dogs, you can literally push them over and they go, "Oh, I'm laying down now. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna stay down here. Oh good, I'm getting scratches. Fuck yeah." I think his lordship here is getting hungry. I can't keep him waiting, not if I don't want him to wake up half the blasted village. I should be off now. But do take care of yourself. I know you're a great growing lass, but by now, the woods can be perilous at night. Even if you have a torch and you know your way. The woods are a lot bigger than they look. I wouldn't want you getting lost. You do know what happened to Delaney girl, don't you? Well, of course Ethel knew what happened to that Delaney girl. Everybody in Oxbury did. And quite the topic of conversation when it happened. Ethel had been living in Oxbury then, just started university in Durham, and she'd been trying desperately to keep her head above the water, but Lauren had told her all about it. Mother had called her breathless to tell her that girl had gone missing. And it wouldn't be the first time either. Don't you remember that Chloe girl? Why do I get the feeling that our new friend is going to be the whole reason that these girls have gone missing? He was still in primary school at that time, but that caused such a stir too. I wonder if these cases are related. Maybe. And I get the feeling we're about to find out why. Ethel hadn't liked the way her mother talked about the girl's disappearance. There's some amusing piece of gossip, no different from who was dating who on Love Island. I found it rather tasteless. Ethel hadn't known the missing girl. She'd not been a local Oxbury, according to a local paper. She'd been staying there for a few days with a couple of relatives. She didn't remember her first name. Thought it had been something unusual though. Something exotic. Why did I think that said erotic? I get the feeling it's going to get erotic at a later stage, but India, maybe indigo. Well, in any case, the girl had been sighted near the edge of the woods by a dog walker. Police had combed every inch of the forest, but a body had never been discovered. There was a body to uncover at all. Maybe the forest declaimed her body then. It was possible that she had grown bored of being stuck in Oxbury. She had run away. There was no guarantee she had come to a sticky end. Neither was there any evidence, but... God, we're not even in the forest already. I'm already allergic to spores in the air. But Ethel was still worried, or wondered. And so it seemed did Mr. Brown. Well, it's been 3 years since the young Miss Delaney's disappearance, but it had cast something of a pall over Oxbury. As a teacher, Mr. Brown must have been more concerned than most. He had spent the better part of his life looking after small children, cleaning skin knees and breaking up arguments over who stole whose favourite toy. Ethel could hardly fault Mr. Brown for worrying, but his concerns still wrinkled. There was something uncomfortably cloying about it. Mr. Brown still regarded her as a child. Is that why he was lecturing her? Ethel was 21 now, but she knew Mr. Brown would never regard her as an adult in her own right. Same with parents. They always see you as like their baby kid. How could he, when he'd known her as a 9-year-old? His realization was an uncomfortable one. It made Ethel cringe. I'll be fine, really. Know my way around. I have my phone. If I do get lost, I'll call for help. Who Ethel would call if she got lost exactly was a mystery to her. Could hardly call her parents, given they were in Australia. She knew she wouldn't have the courage to call the police. Ethel would have hesitated to dial 999, even if her home had been broken into by a couple of machete-wielding muggers. She wouldn't have wanted to be a bird. I honestly feel that I would have done the same at some point. Maybe Mr. Brown realized that. He had known Ethel for several years, but he chose, rather tactfully, not to comment upon it. Instead, he nodded and said, "Very good. Take care then. Make sure you come back before it rains, eh?" "Thank you. I'll see you later." "I'm sure you will. If you need anything while your parents are away, remember, Sparky and I are a few doors down." "Aw, the little dog's name is Sparky." "That's cute." "Sparky? Is that the name of Mr. Brown's dog?" "I suppose it must have been, though what a small dog like Sparky could possibly do to help her, and anybody for that matter, was a mystery. Hey, you never know, he might have a mean bite to him. I mean, he definitely had the voice, at least to alert people." Ethel doubted she would have cause to call Mr. Brown, or on Sparky during the ensuing days, but she didn't say this. She instead nodded and thanked Mr. Brown, who smiled in return. "Good night then, Ethel. Hope you have luck finding your bats." "I hope so too." Ethel hadn't had much luck during her last few months, not since the start of her 3rd and final year at university. She could have used a bit of good fortune. "Oh, we're definitely going to get some sort of fortune. Just not in the bat variety." Mr. Brown gave Ethel a brief wave with the hand which wasn't occupied with Sparky's leash, and turned. Mr. Brown's footsteps faded away, as did the sound of Sparky's indignant yapping, though this took far longer to fade. Such a small dog, Sparky was awfully loud. Ethel watched for a few moments motionless. Then she spun on her heel. Time to go to the forest. Ethel began to walk through the village once more, picking her way through the latticework of shadows which was slowly lengthening on the ground. Footfalls were dull on the pavement, a series of muted sounds which offered little competition when contrasted with the mournful moaning of the wind. It had been breezy when Ethel had stepped outdoors, but the wind was beginning to pick up now. Tugged at her braided hair and she shivered. She should have expected the poor weather, given it was very early January, but she was still surprised by just how frigid it was. What was the temperature? It must have been in the single digits. Ethel looked up at the sky which hung above her, dark and mysterious. And very pretty. Clouds were grim, foreboding even, but they didn't look numerous enough to promise rain. Maybe Mr. Brown was wrong about the weather. But Mr. Brown was a sensible man, and it seemed unlikely he would make a mistake, even, or perhaps especially, about something as mundane as the weather. She would have to be quick about her walk if she didn't want to get drenched. She would step into the woods and make a neat circuit about the trees. Then, after 15 minutes, she would head back. Yes, that would be fine. She wouldn't wander too far. What was the point? It wasn't like Oxbury's forest was all that exciting either. Well, it's about to become exciting for us. It's like a dream-like manner that Ethel navigated the streets. As she did, the wind blew. It sounded sad, like a wounded animal. Maybe coming out here was a mistake after all. What was the point coming all the way out here anyway? There was nothing that Ethel really wanted to do in the woods. She was just trying to run away from the responsibilities, like she had after Clementine. Ethel didn't want to think about that. It was with uncertain eyes that Ethel glanced around the dense woodland which surrounded her. In the distance, somewhere far above her head, an owl hooted. Sound split the air quite suddenly, and Ethel jumped. She hadn't expected it. She could feel her pulse hammering uncomfortably in the base of her neck. Ethel had been into the forest many, many times before. Sometimes with her parents and sometimes with her brothers, though more often than not on her own. And it felt different tonight. Oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be very different. Maybe it was because of Mr. Brown's warning. That Delaney girl was on Ethel's mind. It felt almost as if she were watching her from the shadows, giggling at Ethel's unease. Oh, I'm sure somebody is watching her from the forest, just not Delaney. Something disconcerting about the woods tonight. Something devouring. Oh, I'm sure somebody's going to be devouring us. Seemed almost to be inviting her in, but beneath his cordiality there lurked something uncompromising. With Ethel closed her eyes, she thought she could hear strange whispers upon the breeze. But surely that was silly. Nothing lived in the forest apart from rabbits, mice, and the odd badger. Nothing waiting in the woods for her. She was being stupid. Was a love how the music started to pick up. Definitely a bop. Yes, definitely got a stick beat. Ethel took a deep breath. Then she stepped forwards. Loose leaves strewn on the cold, hard ground crunched beneath their soles. Once again, an owl hooted. This time, however, it didn't startle her. She was prepared for it. Ethel continued to tramp through the woods, father's chunky torch in hand. It wasn't a very reliable source of light. It kept going in and out, but at least it had a dual purpose. Push came to shove, and she was set upon by some miscreant. It was heavy enough that she could use it as a weapon. Ethel doubted anybody would attack her, however, despite Mr. Brown's warnings. That doesn't mean we're not going to meet up with somebody residing in the woods, you know. She was in Oxbury, for goodness sake. Wasn't that sort of place where people were attacked? Hell, not even the missing Delaney girl had been attacked. She had simply disappeared. Besides, it wasn't like Ethel had anything on her that was worth stealing. The phone was an old Samsung, at least 6 generations out of date, so delightfully archaic in the current year that Clementine laughed at her. She always joked that Ethel's phone belonged in a museum. Literally like my dad, who still carries around an old Nokia phone, though he did have to get an upgraded one because of the whole upgrade to like 5G and everything. So the old 3G towers don't work anymore, but yeah. Man loves these old Nokia brick phones. Ethel hadn't bothered to bring her wallet with her either. Weren't any shops open this late. Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about being in a small country town. No stores are open past like 7 p.m. Not that you had many stores in town to begin with, so. There's scarcely any shops in Oxbury at all, save for the corner shop owned by the Lilly family. Now closed at 6 o'clock. My exact point. That's why I didn't read ahead on this, but yeah. My experience of living in a small country town my entire life, yeah. I know exactly what kind of schedule goes on in places like that. 6 had already come, then passed a long time ago. Now it was almost 9 o'clock, and Ethel could feel it. Wind blew, comfortably cold, trailing its invisible fingers against Ethel's cheeks. I'm hoping the cheeks on her face, not the cheeks on her other cheeks. My question would be, why did you have her bare cheeks out in the open? You already have one moon out. Mr. Brown had warned that it might rain. I felt so cold, snow was beginning to seem more likely. Though it had been cold for last month, it hadn't snowed yet. In a predictably British sort of Christmas. Not white, but brown and grey and squatty. It's better than having an Australian summer with 40-degree heat on Christmas Day. Not great. Especially when you have a large family trying to fit into, like, one house. There have been no pure white sheets of incorporeal, whatever that word is, snow. Nor had even a few token powdery flakes fallen from the sky. There had, however, been rain, and plenty of it. Rain which had tipped it down in the stair on Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. That's England for you. Hadn't rained on Christmas itself, which had been something of a small mercy, but had been continuously cloudy and overcast throughout the holy day. I mean, again, that's England for you. When isn't it raining over there? Although I did hear they're having a bit of a heat wave over there currently, so. Ethel hadn't gone out on Christmas though. Parents and brothers had. They asked if she'd like to take a turn in the woods herself, get some colour into her cheeks, but Ethel declined these generous invitations. Ethel thought it would be too muddy, and she didn't want to twist her ankle. Fortunately, it hadn't rained at all in the ensuing week. Frostfall must once have been scorching mud and mire, but now the dirt was reassuringly cold and compact. Ethel wasn't sure whether that would last for very long, however. Not if it really did begin to rain. Oh, back to the night sky again. I really love showing off this background, but I mean, no complaining, it's very pretty. The moon overhead was round and full that night, just like a perfect pearl. The earring nestled in the ear of a beautiful woman. We're definitely going to be seeing a beautiful woman. But luckily, not a werewolf. Otherwise, this would be a completely different story. No one had nagged Ethel to get her own ears pierced, but Ethel had never wanted to go along with it. She'd worried that it would hurt, and anyway, she hadn't really seen the point in it. I mean, some people like their ears pierced, but yeah, it does hurt. I mean, I would imagine so. I mean, I've gotten tattoos, and they definitely hurt, so. At least with piercing, it's just a quick one and done. Unless they fuck up there, nah. Ouch. Didn't understand the appeal of poking holes in herself. Not so she could gussy herself up with studs and hoops and glinting bits of gold. Yeah, there's plenty of painless ways you can do that, like necklaces, rings, other kinds of accessories. She had no interest in making herself a target for any thieving magpies. Ryan always laughed at Ethel's unease. Don't be so dopey. Heaps of girls even younger than you get their ears pierced. I was only 7 when I had mine done. It didn't hurt at all. But Ethel just remained firm. Could be stubborn about the strangest of things. Ryan had been bemused by her daughter's indifference, but she hadn't pushed the issue, not too much at least. Instead, Lauren had shrugged and said, "Oh well, suit yourself. You're being daft though, Effie." That was how most of Ethel's conversations with her mother went. She was always calling her daft. Sometimes Ethel took offence, even though it was very mild insult. Better even than the things kids said on the playground. God, kids can be pretty fucking ruthless. They certainly have no filter. Sometimes, however, she thought that her mother had a point. She really was daft. She was being daft right now, wandering through the woods so very late at night. But still, she didn't stop. Kept on walking, the foliage crunching underfoot. Sometimes Ethel liked to imagine that she was a heroine from a romantic poem. When she wandered through the woods, nameless beauty Lord Byron might have committed to the paper. Oh man, we're definitely in the forest now. My allergies. He walked with all the grace of the night itself. Ethel knew that was nothing more than a fantasy. Well, we're about to live that fantasy. Although, apparently it's not going to be a good kind of fantasy, depending on how you take it. She was, in all aspects, hopelessly plain. Maybe that was why Clementine had. No, Ethel wasn't going to think about that. Didn't have to think about her thesis, however. It was weighing on her. Why, she wondered, had she been silly enough to write her thesis on romantic poets, and they focused so intensely, obsessively even, things which were beautiful? If they were waxing poetic on beautiful women, they were writing of the God, I cannot fucking speak today. Then they were writing of the beauties of nature, of lakes and forests and hills and dizzyingly high cliffs capped with snow. Sometimes Ethel liked to read about the beauties of nature. It was rare that she liked to read about beautiful women. The former was uplifting, but the latter was just depressing. Was that why she was struggling with a thesis so much? Was it the subject matter? Ethel did not think that she had lost an interest in her poetry, but enthusiasm had definitely dwindled. Maybe it was inevitable that Clementine had been the one to pique her interest in the subject. Clementine had always been very passionate about poetry, romantic poetry in particular. Through reading these old poems with Clementine, Ethel had found something in them to appreciate herself, something she had never noticed before. And maybe it was the words of these poems she appreciated, but the way they sounded in Clementine's mouth when she spoke them. Had Ethel only pretended to be interested in poetry because she had wanted to have more in common with Clementine? In retrospect, that seemed depressingly likely. Ethel had wanted Clementine to like her. She had been almost lavish in the way she had followed her about, laughing at all the jokes a little too loudly, affirming that yes, of course all her essays were wonderfully original. She had even offered to be Clementine's caddy when they had been on campus. Ethel had only been too happy to buy Clementine's Clementine drinks from the vending machine or snacks from the shop whenever she so desired. Ethel had wanted Clementine to like her so badly for such a long time. Then Clementine had liked her, and it had been wonderful. For over a year, Ethel had been suspended upon the clouds. Nothing could have hurt her, until it all came crashing down. Had that been inevitable? Maybe she should have expected it. Ethel shuddered. She felt very, very cold, comfortable alongside it. This coldness did not abate the further Ethel walked into the woods. Nice and chill cold inside her guts, clenched about her heart like a vice. And for somebody who's not really that into poetry anymore, they definitely seem to like talking like a poet. She could feel it, too, upon the crown of her head, trickling down her neck. She could feel... Oh. Well, but that's not good. Was that rain? Do you have to ask? Nah, it's lava. Yeah, no shit, it's rain. Looked like Mr. Brown had been right. Rain came slowly at first, and irregularly, but it didn't take long before the spears of the stuff started pelting down. Rain made everything look faint and blurry, as if it had been viewed through a filter. Something in the undergrowth rustled, and Ethel glanced in its direction, wind whipping her hair around her face. What was that? Ethel knew the answer to that was probably nothing. If it was nothing, then it was small, insignificant sort of thing. Kind of like us. I should not be saying that. That is mean. Must have been a rabbit seeking shelter from the rain. That, or a vole, or maybe a sodden squirrel. There was nothing for Ethel to worry about, apart from the miserable weather, of course. Ethel shouldn't have ventured so far into the woods, but it was too late to worry about that now. Couldn't double back on herself in hopes of avoiding the rain. Home was a good half-hour walk away. Ethel had come further than she had meant to, and fallen quite literally off the beaten path. Trees now rose up about her, dark and ominous, like mute watchmen standing sentinel. Ethel looked about worriedly. She had no idea when the rain was going to stop, but she doubted it would be any time soon. She had to take shelter somewhere, but where? Yeah, I don't like the idea of spending a night here in the woods, but gotta lead the story somewhere, eh? What about the church? Wait, there's a church in the woods? Okay, that's rather fucking creepy. St. Catherine's was an old, crooked building which bordered at the forest, located at the fringe of Roxbury, away from the rest of the houses. Ethel's parents weren't religious, but her grandmother was, and she has taken Ethel to St. Catherine's a few times in the past, mostly for Easter and Christmas services, where they sang hymns praising God, and none of them put all that much stock in. Ethel wasn't very religious either. Must have inherited it from her father, just like his freckles. But she did wonder, on occasions, the world was governed by some greater power nobody could see. Ethel had tried praying a few times, as it happened, to see if some mysterious greater being would answer. But she had felt silly and self-conscious. Even though she had been on her own, she'd soon stop. And being able to rid herself of the mental image of her father, scoffing. So he said, God? What a load of bollocks. The only God I believe in is Jimi Hendrix. Of course you do. Ethel hadn't been about to pray to Jimi Hendrix, of course. The mere idea had been so silly it dampened her momentary religious musings. But you'd be surprised at what people would, or who people would pray to. Yeah, some people, are not too good mentally, and get very obsessed with people. a little bit more than others. Ethel still wasn't sure she believed in God, but if he did exist, she was sure he wouldn't mind if she took shelter in one of his churches for a while. She could avoid the worst of the rain, then she would nothing negative to say on the subject of organized religion in the foreseeable future. I mean, obviously same, but still. It wasn't like Ethel had any particular vendetta against Christianity anyway, not like her father, who railed against it being illogical and impractical. He'd found a lot of things illogical and impractical. Ethel knew that her love for English literature ranked quite highly on his list. Ethel bit her lip. Then she began to pick her way through the forest. Rain was coming down even harder now, thick and fast and unforgiving, and it obscured her vision. Didn't help that it was so dark either. Light from Jude's old torch wasn't doing much help. It's hard for Ethel to keep her footing. It was mulchy and it was festooned with roots, arched, raised things which threatened to trip Ethel at every step. Ethel sidestepped a thorn bush and nearly walked smack dab into a tree, though she was able to circumnavigate it just in time. That had been a close call. As little as Ethel enjoyed being rained on, she enjoyed the thought of breaking a limb even less. Ethel continued to walk, picking up her speed as she did. Church wasn't so far away now. She would be able to duck inside and dry herself off, provided of course that the door wasn't locked. Oop, here we are. She broke through the last lines of trees. Her clothes sticking to her skin like tripalium, and looked up at St. Catherine's. Church was small and squat, but it did look oddly imposing in the dark, its tiled roofs superimposed against the wickedly thin crescent moon. Oh, okay, it's a crescent moon. Okay, I thought we were in full moon. Okay. St. Catherine's arched window door loomed over Ethel as she approached it, almost consuming the darkness. But luckily for us, the artist decided to not make it pitch black and we can see everything very clearly. Although I guess we'll see everything a lot more clearly when the rain is gone. Ethel had been sure she had been able to take shelter here, like the persecuted Esmeralda and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but maybe not. Maybe we don't want to be Esmeralda unless we want a wrinkly old priest lusting over us. I mean, that's pretty much every church anyway, but without it needing to be a fictional movie. Anyway, it wouldn't have been too surprising if the warden had locked the church come sunset. But it wouldn't do to have vandals laying waste on its interior, making off with the burnished bronze candlesticks and the prayer meats, or mats. Why did I think I said meats instead of mats? Man, I must be hungry. Ethel didn't think there was anything worth nicking in St. Catherine's, but some people would take anything if it wasn't nailed down. Like me in most games. If I can steal shit, I'm gonna fucking take it. Because why not? You're gonna put it there to steal, I'm gonna fucking take it. Wasn't like there was much to do in Oxbury, other than look for the potentially decomposing corpse of that presumably dead Delaney girl. Now she had come this far, she felt compelled to try. Would have been foolish to back down now. Ethel paused to wipe her brow free of rainwater. Not that much mattered, really, given how fiercely the rain was still pouring down. Then she reached for the wooden door of St. Catherine's, pressed her palm against the door and pushed inwards. She didn't expect the door to give way beneath her touch. She was starting to feel decidedly pessimistic, but Ethel gasped, surprised. the door cleaved beneath her touch. So it was open after all. That was reassuring. Ethel pushed against the door with more strength than before. The door swung inwards. The door was heavy, but offered little resistance, creaking loudly like some subterranean monster. Ethel could see a sliver of the church through the gap, which emerged and she could see it was dark. This, however, was to be expected. It was very late at night. It seemed unlikely that there would be anybody else here at such an hour. Would have been alarmed, in fact, if there was. Came as a great surprise, therefore, when Ethel finally slipped inside the building and she saw her. Here we go. Finally, it's about time. Oh, have a mysterious encounter with somebody in the church. Yeah, it's quite a dress, but I feel like it'd be very cold with it on, with weather outside right now. And she almost looks like a ballerina. There's a girl standing in the chancel, framed by the stained glass window. Ethel could see the girl's face, but she could see her, couldn't see the girl's face, but she could see how slender her waist was, how shapely her calves. The girl wasn't dressed for a downpour, dressed for a British winter in general, rain notwithstanding. The girl's clothes were simple, a summer dress cinched at the back with a ribbon. Legs were bare. She wore no leggings nor any tights. It didn't even look like she was wearing socks. Instead, she wore a pair of sandals, which had a slight... The fuck is this kind of music? Very weird. Had the slightest suggestion of a heel. Backs of the girl's feet were exposed, feet which were arched and raised a couple of centimeters above the floor. The girl was only standing, but there was a curious grace to her, even as she remained motionless, which made Ethel's heart ache. Ethel would get to see her face, but she didn't need to. She already knew that the girl would be heartbreakingly beautiful. The girl wasn't even a little bit damp, not like Ethel. Must have arrived at the church before the rain had started. That or she had the foresight to bring an umbrella with her. Why, Ethel wondered. She brought an umbrella too. Could have ducked back inside after Mr. Brown had warned her about the rain to retrieve one. Wouldn't that have been the sensible thing to do? Ethel wanted to do a sensible thing, however. She hadn't wanted to listen to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown had been a teacher once. She had wanted to prove to herself she wasn't a child anymore. No longer had to take his advice. How very wrong she was. Once more her mother cheerfully castigations returned to Ethel. Oh well, suit yourself. You are being daft though, Effie. Why was it that all the adults in her life seemed to know better than she did? Mary had never been to university, neither had Jude, but they were far more sensible. Maybe it was because, no matter what Ethel liked to tell herself, she wasn't a real adult herself. She was still a child, a little girl playing pretend. But there was a little sense standing there, sadly, smelling a petrichor, slowly dribbling rainwater all over the uneven stone floor. The girl was not simply standing there, she was singing. Ethel recognized the song which tumbled from her lips, pure and clear as spring water. It was Ave Maria. Oh, that was actually the name of the tune as well. Ethel stood there, stunned into silence. The more the girl sang, the less the rest of the world seemed to matter. steady pitter-patter of the rain fell away, simply ceased to exist. Several moments, it was just Ethel and the girl's lovely lyrical voice. Ethel stood there dumbly, and the girl's voice washed over her when... And the first time we see your voice, we can already tell you're definitely a creepy lady. And a little bit crazy. My, what do we have here? Oh. Ethel jumped as the girl turned back, her bold hair fluttering. The girl was standing in such a way that the stained glass window at the back of the church framed her face perfectly. The positioning of it was so perfect. In fact, it looked like a shot from a movie. The girl, a trained actress, told precisely where to stand. Moonlight which shone through the window backlit the girl's short hair, so it glowed just like an inverted halo. The girl didn't look like any of the angels Ethel had seen pictured before. Maybe because she's not an angel, and maybe, an archangel, an archangel, or maybe a demon. However, none the romantic soul with golden locks and baby blues, nor the biblically accurate ones made of flickering flames with hundreds of vast staring eyes. Girl only had 2 eyes, which were positioned where they should have been, and framed with a sweep of dark lashes. Nose was snub and her lips curved upward into a smile. The skin, meanwhile, was very white. Didn't have any wings, and neither did she wear a robe, though her pale green dress looked almost angelic. I mean, unless it's one of those angels from Supernatural where you don't really get to see their wings, unless they wish to show it to you, but... Too much mischief in her smile for her countenance to be truly sapphiric, but she still took Ethel's breath away. Well, hello, stranger. I've not seen you around before. Not that that's saying much, I guess. I don't know many people around here. What, are you watching me? Ethel's face, which had always been pinkish undertone, now turned red. She dropped her gaze to her feet and mumbled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. So you were watching me? Ethel nodded on the damp, fleshy inside of her cheek. A few moments of silence passed. The silence was filled with the steady pitter-patter of the rain outside. It fell on the grass and the dirt and all the tombstones. Ethel could feel her palms beginning to sweat. Slowly, like a mechanical doll in need of recalibrating, she nodded. I thought so. I'm glad you're not a liar. I like honest girls. Girl? Ethel frowned. Manny had taken great offense about being called a boy the moment he'd started secondary school. He was in year 9 now, but his voice hadn't dropped and he already had facial hair, and everybody called him a young man. Why then did Ethel have to be a girl? She was already 21. She was too old for it, wasn't she? Oh, don't like being called a girl? I didn't offend you, did I? Oh no, it's fine. I don't mind. I probably offended you more with my staring. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Oh, you don't need to apologize, silly. I don't mind. You don't? Girl shook her head. I was only teasing. Might be rude to eavesdrop, but I prefer singing when I have a captive audience. Otherwise, it feels a bit pointless. So, what did you think? What about? About my singing, obviously. Was it good? Great? Best thing you've ever heard? You were enchanting. Enchanting, eh? That's a bit more flowery than I expected. Do you like reading by any chance? I study English literature at university, so I guess. I knew it. You did give me that impression. So, Gil took a seat upon the pew, and showed Ethel a look which could only be described as, "Come hither." Maybe we should take this to the bedroom, mate. Maybe a little bit too soon for that. With a half-moon smile, she patted the pew, a pale hand cleaving through the darkness. Why don't you come here and talk to me? Feels like it's been an age since I last had a chat with a girl my age, and I'm dying for it. Boxberry is so boring. Ethel hung back, abashed, and was afraid at the girl's insistence. Why was this girl so interested in her? It wasn't anything special. It seemed ludicrous, unthinkable even, that she should care. Girl really must be bored. Hey, don't sell yourself too short. But maybe in this instance too, because I get the feeling we shouldn't really trust her too much. But we'll soon see. Was Ethel her last resort? Last-ditch attempt to keep herself amused? Hello? Girl cocked her head to one side, smile an amused, impish one. Didn't you hear me? Would have thought the rain would have washed those ears of yours out. Would you come and sit with me? Could hardly have a conversation with you from all the way across the church. Was you afraid that I might bite? Ethel allowed herself to think briefly of the girl's bite. A sharpened scissors digging into her throat, like something from a gothic novel. And she shivered. Not sure she wholly disliked that thought. Just left her feeling unsettled. Oh great, of course. She has her deep, dark desires, and she is a masochist. Made no surprise. You always gotta be wary of the quiet girls, because, they're always the freaky ones. No, it's fine. I'm not afraid. I'll sit. Ethel crossed the church, his soul slapping against the flagstones. Then sat. She was still damp, and droplets of water slid from her clothes as she walked. Small puddles tracked her progress from the entrance of the church, with its domed door, all the way to the pew where she settled herself. Ethel's long skirt was clinging to her thighs. Her sweater was uncomfortably damp. Ethel tended to wear baggy, oversized clothes, but the rainwater had rendered them uncomfortably skin-tight. She would have felt self-conscious regardless, being seen in such a state by anybody, even Mr. Brown, but being perceived by a girl as pretty as whatever her name was, looked like she could have been a Celeste or even a Celine, wasn't doing her self-esteem any favours. Lately, Ethel took down at her lap, and wanly she threaded her fingers together. So she had sat, just like the girl had asked her. Now what? My, you're quite the awkward one, aren't you? Barely said more than a word to me since seeing me. Please, don't tell me you're really afraid of me. What? No. I'm just shy. I'm sorry. You've not done anything wrong. This is all my fault. Girl frowned, one hand resting beneath her chin. You say it's your fault. I don't think you've done anything wrong either. You don't? No, I don't. Don't see why you feel the need to apologize. Not that, I was just stating a fact. You're so quiet. I was worrying whether I'd done something to upset you. But I guess that this is just the way you are. I've never been good at small talk. I don't really know what to say, so, I'm sorry. I must be so boring. Now, I'll be the judge of that. Not knowing you long enough to find you boring, I wouldn't have started talking to you in the first place if you hadn't piqued my interest. Don't think I'm a poor judge of character, do you? In this case, maybe she was, but Ethel was so afraid of offending the girl, even inadvertently, she hastily said, I don't think so, but hard to say. I mean, I don't know you very well. You raise a good point. We are strangers. This has been a pretty strange meeting. I'd be surprised if you're wondering who this crazy girl is. Who's been singing by herself in the church at night. Must seem like a total nutter. I don't know if I'd say that. You probably wouldn't, no. I think you're too considerate. I wouldn't have been surprised if that's what you're thinking, though. Well, go on, you can be honest with me. You must think I'm balmy. I don't know if I'd call you that, but this is a bit strange, I suppose. Oh, come on, you're being too generous. No, I'm more than a bit strange. Your hobbies might be a bit unusual, I guess. Again, with a tact. You'd make a good politician. But who am I to judge? I went for a walk in the woods late at night. When I knew it was going to rain, I'm not much better. I guess not. Maybe that's what brought us together then. What, the rain? No, silly. I think there's a deeper meaning behind our meeting than this. Deeper? Yeah, must be like two alike souls. Maybe two birds of a feather. That doesn't sound too out there. We're both weirdos, so we ought to stick together. The world isn't very accepting of people like us. Now, what's your name? Surely you must have one. Oh, I'm Ethel. Ethel's voice was quiet when she replied, but she repeated a curse word, and to her ears it might as well have been one. As far as names went, Ethel wasn't very flattering. It was so old-fashioned. It spoke mainly of elderly spinsters than it did a 21-year-old. Shania had teased Ethel about her naming incessantly, though she hadn't been named after the country singer. Ethel would have preferred to be a Shania any day of the week over boring old Ethel, though. Ethel often resented her parents for landing with the name, though it was mostly Laura's fault, she supposed, for naming her after her grandmother, Ethel's great-grandmother, especially when her brothers were certainly modern names. Why was she the only one stuck with a name plucked straight from the dusty archives of a Victorian poorhouse? It was so unfair. Gal didn't seem to mind Ethel's name, however, because she laughed. Ethel, how pretty. No, it isn't. You're teasing me. No, I'm not. Honest to God. We're in a church, and I never dare take the Lord's name in vain. I'm a good Christian like that, you know. You are? No, I really am pulling your leg. Right, well, I suspected as much. You shouldn't be so self-conscious, though. Ethel's a perfectly nice name. Many girls who are saddled with much, much worse. I'm sure we'll be saddling later. I really got You guys haven't got it already, I have a fucking problem. Right, well, try telling that to Shania. Who's Shania? Oh, nobody. She doesn't matter. Not anymore. You wouldn't know her. Ethel's voice trailed off. Then she frowned. By the way, where are you from? You aren't a local, are you? Oh no, thank God I don't believe in it for it. Village is so small. They gotta go mad. Madder than I am. I mean, if I had to live here. Are you visiting then? That's right. I'm here to stay with my grandparents over the holidays. My parents are pretty busy right now, so they dumped me here. I've only been here a couple of days, but I'm already bored out of my tree. Couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. Figured I might as well stretch my legs. Also, are we gonna get to learn your name at some point? Rather us just keep on calling you the girl. I was afraid I'd go stir crazy otherwise, but maybe it's too late for that. Oh, I'm sure we're gonna get to see more of your crazy side later, hey. I see, will you be staying in Oxbury for long? Not too long. Parents will be picking me up in a few days. Oh, right, of course. Ethel tried to keep the disappointment from her voice when she spoke. Why should she care when the girl went home? She hardly knew her. Still didn't know her name, in fact. Maybe Ethel thought worriedly. She should have asked the girl that first, before inquiring if she was a local to the area. That would have been the polite thing to do, but Ethel spoke to others so rarely, she found it difficult to know what the polite thing to do was. She was so awkward. Well, it was time enough to right this oversight. I'm sorry, but it just occurred to me, what? I might not have been born here, but I am pretty familiar with this village. I know my way around rather well, which is how I wound up here. Not that that's saying very much, since there isn't all that much to know, but you know what I mean. Right, Ethel blinked. Plans to ask the girl's name summarily scuppered. There was a small pause, then. Do you come to Oxbury very often? More often than I'd like. The place is pretty dead, but oh well. Like the dead missing girls, eh? Know anything about that? I wind up in Oxbury a lot during the holidays, since my parents are always palming me off to my grandparents. Spend a lot of my summers here, and a lot of my winters too. Summers here are depressing enough, since there's nothing to do, but the winters are even worse. So cold and dark, and so wet too. Rains so much the ground gets all mulchy. Pretty miserable. No offense. I don't want to insult this place too much. When you were born here, I hope you don't mind. That's fine, I'm not offended. Actually, I agree with you. Well, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's a different story with my grandparents, though. They love this place. They've been living here for, God, I don't know, their whole long lives, more or less, so they're pretty settled. When to hear a bad word against Roxbury, they're obsessed. Yeah, that's the thing about old people, they tend to get stuck in their own ways. Especially ones living out in the country, because they can definitely be characters, that's for sure. Just as long as you don't disagree with them or say anything bad, then they were old, you know, when I was a kid, but they're even older now, if you can credit that. I think that's why they like Oxbury. It doesn't change, just like them. It's completely static. Ethel frowned, lost in contemplation. Girl's voice was light, but there was something sad about her words. Something which twisted Ethel's insides. When people reach their twilight years, typically when they pass into their 80s, it became almost impossible to discern their age from their appearance. There wasn't much difference, or so Ethel had always thought, between an 80 and a 90-year-old. Old age had an missing factor. It stripped the individuality out of people, rendering them indistinguishable from one another. Look at you and using your big words. Why are there so many big words in this? As far as Ethel was concerned, all the people were all white-haired and rheumy-eyed, their faces scored with wrinkles. Their fingers were choppy, their hands shook, and they complained of a myriad of problems. Bad backs, bad eyes, bad hearts. Ethel didn't like the body she inhabited at the present. She'd been teased over her appearance one too many times, but she liked the thought of getting older even less. Honestly, with you there as well. I already have so many health issues already, and the older I get, the more bleaker it looks for me. Didn't think she ever wanted to be 50, much less 80 or 90. She liked life too little to try and cling to it for all that long. What was the point? My parents have been having my grandparents look after me since I was a kid, but I don't think they ever cut out for the job. They could never keep up with me. I was a wee little thing back then, about this tall. Go gestured with the right hand for emphasis. But even then, I got this feeling I was no good for my poor old grandparents. He used to fret having to run around after me, would drive them into their early graves. But it's been years since then. They're both alive and kicking, but not literally. They're so old I don't think they'd be capable of it. Are you afraid they might dislocate their hip if they did that? I got to say, I didn't expect that from you. You're more fiery than you look. Oh, I hope you don't mind. Nah, I think it's funny. I like the contrast of your sweet exterior and your spicy interior. It was a surprise, but it was a pleasant one. I don't know if I'm particularly spicy. You sure about that? You know, talking about liking pain and masturbation with a violin, you know, so we get rather spicy. But thank you. You're welcome. Hope you're not getting the wrong idea though. I know I'm being mean about my grandparents, but I do love them. They're the only grandparents I have, and I owe them a lot. They're dear to me. But I have to spend a lot of time with them in this porky little village, and it does get stifling. Someday I'd like to take off, see a bit more of the world. It's all very constricting. But what about your parents? Where do they live? Oh, some tiny town not too far away from here. And have they never taken you on a holiday with them before? They never bothered. Whether they go anywhere, I'm always dumped here with my old folks. And let me tell you, they really are old. I'm not even sure if they're pushing 90 or maybe even 100. 100? Ethel was dead, all the while trying to solve some basic mental mass. Ethel's grandparents on her mother's side were relatively young as far as grandparents went, and they had a mother when they were in their very early 20s. Maternal grandma was only 62, and maternal grandfather 66. Maternal grandparents were a bit older. They were both in their mid-70s, but they weren't pushing it into their 80s just yet. They definitely weren't close to 100. Girl's family must have skewed awfully old. Ethel was still trying to work this out, something the girl seemed to notice because she smiled. I'm exaggerating, of course. Oh, right, of course. I'm not joking when I say they're old, though. I don't like being with them in their rank-smelling house, which is all brown and green and damp. Walls have rots and it's moist all year round, so the window panes are all waterlogged. It's awful. I want to stay here if I had a choice, but don't really have any friends. My family is pretty small, so... Girl shrugged. I guess it could be worse, but I don't like having to spend all my holidays out in this stuff. Wish my parents would think about me a little more, but they're never going to happen. That's never going to happen. Always been so selfish. Girl sighed. She sounded bitter, unexpectedly so, given how lightly she had spoken before. It was obvious that a degree of resentment simmered beneath her seemingly iridescent surface, something which didn't seem to be buried all that deeply. Well, if she had inner demons, she wouldn't be the only one. I mean, I guess we all have inner demons. It just depends on if people like to bring out those demons and act out on them, you know. She was only human. Right. Oh. It was only gasped, wide-eyed as she stared at Ethel. Where are my manners? Spent all this time talking about myself, but I've not asked about you. You were born in Oxbury, weren't you? Oh, yes, that's right. And you still live here, I'm guessing? With my parents and my two brothers, yeah. Rowan and Manny. Ah, I see. Don't have any siblings myself. No sisters or brothers. I've always wondered what it'd be like, though. It's, alright, I guess. Don't sound too sure. Well, it's hard for me to say what it's like. I had brothers for most of my life. Ron was born when I was 4, and Manny when I was 7, so I can't really remember what life was like before they arrived. I see, that sounds kinda nice. If I had a sibling or two to keep me company, maybe spending all this time with my grandparents wouldn't be so bad. But who knows, maybe they just annoy me. I don't know if I like to share my stuff with them either. I can be pretty selfish. Oh, sure you are. Sure the other girls in life are. Found that out pretty quickly, hey? Girl's eyes glinted when she said this. It struck a mischief which made Ethel's skin prickle. Yeah, I think there's a bit more than just a mischief. Maybe a little bit of murdering too, you know. Felt a little unsettling about the way she looked at Ethel. Yeah, probably because she wants us as her next meal. Her eyes were intense, though she meant to devour Ethel from I swear. Somehow I managed to predict what is about to be said before I even read ahead. Surely there was nothing more than a fancy. Right. Right. So, where's your family right now, Ethel? Are they back at home waiting for you? Hope they're not worried about you. It is pretty late. Wouldn't want to make them anxious. Or you're hoping that I'm home alone so that you can, snatch me up without having to have anybody worry about that I'm missing for a few more days. Oh, no. It's fine. They won't be waiting. I mean, not even home. They've gone to Australia. Australia? That's so far away. I've never been there before, but is it true that the seasons are all mixed up compared to ours? They're reversed, yeah. Winter is like our summer. It's something to do with the hemispheres. Crazy. So used to wet, damp old Oxbury. I think that would take some getting used to. Yeah, and we get pretty hot down here too, especially during our summers, compared to good old England where it's all cold and damp and rainy most of the time. That's what I thought too. It's probably going there would throw me off, especially when it's been so cold here. Is that why you didn't want to go then? Did you turn down their invitation? Or did they not invite you? We did, yeah. Ticket was booked and everything. I've been planning it for a few months, ever since April this year actually. She was pretty insistent that I accompany her. Supposed to be a family holiday, but... well... Ethel sighed. How she wondered was she supposed to explain her reasoning for staying behind to this girl. She wasn't entirely sure she understood her reasoning herself. She had overcomplicated things by being so moody. But wasn't that the whole what she always did? She was forever making things more difficult, not that she wanted to. Just seemed to happen. Hey Ethel, didn't you have an argument with your family? Didn't have an argument with your family, did you? Oh, no, it's not like that. They're fine, really. Everything's fine. Then why didn't you want to go? I'd leave England at the drop of a hat if I could. So wet and cold and... Can't stand it here. So gloomy. Australia sounds much nicer. It does sound nicer, but... Girl shifted a little closer to Ethel, so much so their thighs brushed. Don't you like being with your family? Don't you get on with them? It's not that I don't get on with my parents. They're nice enough, I guess. Mum nags me about my clothes and my hair sometimes. But that can be a bit insensitive, maybe. Maybe a little old-fashioned too. Ethel thought back on the numerous occasions she tried to practice her violin at home, occasions in which had been swiftly terminated by Dad telling her to put a cork in it, because he was trying to watch the telly. But they're not bad parents, not abusive. Other people have had it much worse, so therefore me to complain. And yet, despite that, you still didn't want to go on holiday with them. It's not like that. What is it like then? It's my fault, really. They've not done anything wrong, it's all me. What sort of you? I don't understand. It's not that complicated, really. It's just, the way I think about things. My parents are fine, they're lovely even, and my brothers. They argue sometimes, but I think that's normal. All siblings argue. Clementine always picks fights with her sisters too. Clementine? My girlfriend, Ethel wanted to say, but that would have been a lie. Clementine wasn't her girlfriend anymore. They'd spoken so little after their breakup. Ethel was uncertain whether she was even her friend. What was Clementine to her now? Was she anything to her now? She's just a person I know from university. We talked a bit. Ah, a friend then. We were friends. I don't know about now, but not that it matters. None of it does really. What doesn't matter? My feelings, maybe? I've been a bit down, I guess. I couldn't tell. It's always been very silly. It's mostly self-inflicted, anyway. Let's get like this in strange moods, I mean. What my mum says. Thinks I should back my ideas up. Maybe she's right. Not like I want to feel sad. Of course you don't. Don't think anyone does. But sometimes, no, most of the time, actually, I feel like a burden. Just more than my parents and my brothers. And Clementine too. So I don't want to go on holiday with them. They insisted, but I don't know. I said the holiday wouldn't be the same without me. Probably right. I think it'd be for the better. Being so gloomy, I don't think they want to put up with me. Pros were planning this holiday for ages. They're looking forward to it. That's why I didn't want to come along. No, I'm not in the right mood to enjoy it. Maybe I'd make everybody unhappy. Then I'd spoil everything. I think Ethel's fingers laying on top of her lap curled in on themselves. Her nails, which were short and serrated, invited them lately, though it was a habit she tried for years to kick, digging into her palms. Shoulders shook. Then, very quietly, she said, I think they'd be happier without me. Clementine certainly had been. It was to say a family wouldn't share her opinion. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's been really silly, really. I know my family does care. Obviously they do. It's just sometimes... Ethel started, surprised. The girl was sitting closer to her than before. Fingers twined together, her eyes round, almost owl-like in their concern. Ethel stammered, stunned by the sudden unexpected closeness, stunned too by the sensation of the girl's skin upon her own. And it was icy cold. It's alright, you don't need to try and explain yourself. Not to me. I understand how you feel. I understand only too well. You do? A little. You aren't the only person who's been feeling lonely, but I wish you wouldn't be so hard on yourself. Don't say that nobody cares. No, I shouldn't. It's childish to think that way. Of course my parents care, but don't make you feel like they do. Ethel looked into the girl's eyes, held captive by the intensity of her gaze. For a few moments she could do nothing except sit there. She swallowed, tasting sawdust in her throat and dead empty air. Then, like an aged automaton that was in dire need of oiling, she shook her head. Oh, you poor dear. Sounds like life has been very hard for you. But try not to worry. You're not alone. Know how it feels being unwanted. It's awful. But it feels so unjustified in your case too. After all... Girl reached out, caught Ethel's cheeks with her fingers, palms icy against Ethel's warm skin, and said, You're so nice. Do you really think so? I think you must be, otherwise you wouldn't have listened to me so patiently when I was complaining about my grandparents. You're a sweetheart. No matter how other people may have made you feel, I'm happy to be spending time with you. But the music makes me think otherwise. Definitely very creepy and not happy at all. Very ominous. Meeting you has been really refreshing, actually. It's almost enough to make me think this was fated. Fated? That's right. I think you're sent here for a reason. You can laugh if you want, but I'm a pretty superstitious person. I make count on spending so much time with my grandmother. She always put a lot of stock into that sort of thing. Tea leaves and the alignment of planets and star signs. And I don't think our meeting happened for no reason. It must have been ordained by, I don't know, fate, destiny, karma, kismet. Call it what you will. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I've let one too many of my grandmother's silly stories get to me. They leant in on it even more closely. Such a thing was possible. Then quietly she said, "But there must be a greater reason behind why our paths crossed tonight. I'm sure of it. Been so lonely here these last few days. Nobody my age to talk to." Girl's eyes continued to bore into Ethel's. Large, dark eyes lined with long, dark lashes, which seemed pregnant, of all things, with meaning. Okay, that's one way to describe it, I guess. But now, I have you. You have me? Yes, I have you. You're mine now, just like I'm yours. I can be your strange singing girl who takes refuge in the church at night to recite hymns, and you can be my wet, windswept stranger. Come in from the cold. Oh, I'm sure you'll make me wet later. I'm sorry, but they just handed to me. I'll wait for you tomorrow night too. In this church, we can have another wonderful tyrant inside this crooked old building. How does that sound? Don't you think it's romantic? Just like something from a fairy tale. But this one, I get the feeling it's gonna end badly. Maybe it's like one of those Brother Grimm's original fairy tales, because those ones were, man, they were definitely on something. Not like the ones we see in the Disney movies. They get very fucked up. Ethel thought of this. Girl's icy fingers, why were they so cold? Upon her own, and as she did, she felt herself blush. It wasn't a very pretty blush, of course. Ethel wasn't very good in general. Her blushes, when they came, were uncomfortably intense, red and blotchy, and not very dissimilar from acne. She wasn't attractive. Ethel knew she wasn't attractive. But she wondered in that quiet, understood moment in that church whether she was pretty in a dark-haired girl, or was pretty to the dark-haired girl who cupped her cheeks. If this is a fairy tale, then would this have a happy ending? Well now, that depends on whether you come back, of course. I'll be waiting here, so don't be a stranger. Stop on by. If you don't, I think we'll both regret it. Right, sure, I don't like how that sounds. I mean, really, the girl smiled. Then I won't be able to do this. Man, we only just met and we're already kissing. Great. Hopefully her lips aren't poisoned. Like that Alice Cooper song said. Girl dipped her head before Ethel could say anything. Before she knew what was happening, Ethel soon felt something soft against her lips and gasped. She could hardly believe it, but Girl was kissing her. You gotta seal the deal, right? Gotta have her wanting more, you know. Kiss lasted for but a few seconds. It was no more than a faint brushing of the lips, but it was enough to make Ethel's heart stammer. She knew as the girl kissed her, palms so pressed against her cheeks that the signal changed, though what sort of change it was exactly remained a mystery. Oh, I'm sure this mystery will solve itself eventually, eh? That's the thing about mysteries. Most of them tend to have some conflicts. It was undeniable, however, that this would alter her holiday for good. Oh, that it will. Things would never be the same again. Girl had branded her. Her kiss corroded like acid, disintegrating all of Ethel's thoughts as if they were made of nothing more than the flimsiest, most insubstantial crepe paper. There was the touch. There was the girl. There was the kiss. And there was nothing else at all. Nothing in the whole world.